There was kind of an interesting podcast though. Well, you interviewed Jason Calacanis before, so he's
Yeah.
got that This Week in Startups podcast,
Hmm.
and DHH went on it, and he was talking about a lot of stuff, a lot of political things like failings with the U.S. systems in general. But one part that was particularly interesting to me was he was talking about Lambda School, which is like an online code camp.
Mm.
And I previously went to a coding boot camp called Hack
Yeah.
Reactor.
Yeah.
I had a fantastic experience.
Hmm.
I knew literally like all the first 100 students who went through it. I knew like everyone in the first, I think, 8 classes at least.
Hmm.
And overwhelmingly, they had great experiences. There were a couple students who decided fairly quickly to drop out.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I mean, the school could have kept their money, but as far as I know, they gave it back every single time.
Uh-huh.
And
And so what were they saying about the Lambda stuff?
So DHH was basically, he was saying it was very parasitical, and like you could not find some, because he's Dutch, I believe, and he I think he went to college for free, and not only that, but got a stipend on top of it, because he was talking about the stipend system. In any case, Dutch students now can. And he was saying you could not find someone in Europe who's willing to pay $30,000 for a 9-month online, like remote boot camp,
That makes sense.
especially if they don't have the $30,000. And like that seems really compelling to me. And I understand like the
What, it
promise
seems
of it is
compelling to you to get by that course?
Hack Reactor was an amazing deal for me. So that was $18,000 for 3 months.
Online?
But
Or
no, it was in person, and
Yeah.
it was very intense. It was in person, like
Yeah.
12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and I was there more than 12 hours a day because they didn't really kick us out until midnight. So it was, yeah, it was a great learning experience for me. The school had no reputation at all when I went through it, but just the change in hard skills was enough that, like when I first went in, I was struggling to even get interviews. And then by the time I got out, I had 3 offers and a whole bunch of others in the pike, including Google. They were really
wow.
slow though, and I ended up going to Groupon.
Hmm.
And, I think it was easily worth it. And even given the choice of staying for, like, if I could have stayed for 4 years and paid the same amount, I still prefer having done it in 3 months. Because, I mean, worst case scenario, actually, it's just better. You just learn a lot in a small amount of time. And even if it's not as much as you would learn in 4 years, which it's not really, but it's still more intense than you would think for 3 months. I would love a model where you go for like 3 months, you work for a year and a half, then you maybe do one on machine learning or one on some other thing you're into.
Was your main
months.
takeaway that this was kind of ridiculous that it was 9 months, 30,000 online?
Well, my takeaway was this is a different perspective. It's really interesting seeing how bad he thought it was, but he was also saying like their course completion rate wasn't as good, and also that I guess the income sharing agreements that they make with the students, they turn around and sell to banks or to some other financial organizations. So the students, like if their students aren't happy, they can't actually go to the school and say, hey, this didn't do what you promised, I want a refund. They have to go to like the new owners of their future earnings. So it did seem kind of bad, but I think, yeah, maybe it just like costs more, and it's also remote, so it feels like it should have been cheaper. But it was an interesting perspective, and Jason was very much on the side of if people want to do this, why shouldn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm generally pretty much against the idea that everyone should get a 4-year degree, that you have to have a certain kind of credential. I don't think it's the fastest way to learn. I don't think it's also, I think just economically, it's pretty stupid to have everyone go to like these industrial scale collegiate programs where every year you have millions of people emerging with basically the same skill set. I mean, just by supply and demand, if there's that big of a supply, the prices will go down. So like you're hurting people's earnings by having too much of a cookie cutter, everyone has the same skills approach. So
Yes.
I'd like to see like more diversity of lots of things, but if it's something where there's like a really hard sell and you're saying, hey, we're gonna like triple your earnings, and then you're stuck, you're on the line for like $30K and you can't get a job, like yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm definitely in agreement with that. Education is a very interesting thing, and the whole bubble, like having to spend so much money. I mean, for me personally, I didn't do that. Like, I was out of school by 16, and
Yeah, and you
know,
have a Silicon Valley
coding.
career.
Coding, well, I wouldn't say Silicon Valley, but it's sort of it's
California.
Sort of California.
It's a whole state now.
But it's I think that's what I love about coding is it really can be an apprenticeship path. It's just sort of do it, and you can just get straight in there and do it and start building stuff, and it's so easy. It's way easier now than when I started.
Do you think it's easier to get in now?
I think it's easier to so. When I started and built the very first thing I ever built, which was the virtual Irish pub, and learnt C on the fly to build a CGI, and there was like pretty much no resources to like teach you how to do that other than books that you had to go to the library, and they didn't say anything about building a chat room. Like that was tough. Right. But now I think you can just, everything's a Google away, so you can just really, it's much easier to start. Which obviously commoditizes it and means that it's harder to build the true value. So I think that's where the time comes in. So the code camps are interesting because like you describe, you're there for 3 months and then you can sort of get the 80%. Well, I wouldn't say the 80%. Get the 20%. You can get the 20%, but then the other 80% does kind of take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Like once you've been coding for 20 years, you have a very different concept on coding and building stuff than you did when you were 5 years into it.
Well, I think that's true, but I think in order to get what a typical CS student gets, it's a really different comparison. Because I would say in general, people coming out of code camps they've done more pair programming. They've had more time where an actual professional has
super
been
successful
looking at their code and giving them help while they're working on stuff. They have a lot less math. They have a lot less. They do a fair amount of algorithm related work, but they have they don't have like a compiler class. They don't do OS. They don't do Autonoma. But you can do all that stuff on Coursera, right? Like after I got a job at Groupon, the first thing I did was started checking out Coursera courses.
I think the places where someone who comes out of a course like that, the places where they're just going to need time. I mean, they're just going to need years, in my opinion, like 2, 3, 4, 5 years, is just understanding the big picture architecture, services, like the full stack, like just basically. You got to go through that a few times before you kind of get it or make good decisions. And even frameworks, like if you never write a framework, that's a problem in my opinion. Like it's not until you write a framework that you I feel like that is a rite of passage. You kind of need to write some kind of framework or other to understand frameworks. Otherwise you're just kind of using stuff.